But one of the things that we do see that some people will do is, in order to keep their housing so they're not going to get evicted, they might start paying that rent and then not having enough food. And another thing that I think can flip what can happen is, if somebody does lose their housing, that's one of the first things they absolutely need.
Welcome to the DMF podcast, where you will find great conversations with interesting people who have been called to serve. We'll meet impactful charities, dive deep into pressing health topics, and learn from servant leaders who are working to see, be, and spread light. At the end of each episode, we hope you're inspired to realize that you have your own unlimited potential to change the world for the better. Join us as we work to create a region of the healthiest, most purpose-driven people on the planet. Welcome back to the DMF podcast. I'm your host, Whitney Isaacson. Thanks for joining me in another conversation as we highlight a health issue that's impacting us today. Can you imagine being a family of 5, having to choose each week between buying groceries for the family or paying rent? This is the case for so many families around our communities. Over 77,000 people across North Dakota experience food insecurity, and we don't even realize it because it's a basic need that is most of the time invisible. As I was looking into food insecurity more, I wanted to bring in a local expert. I'm excited to introduce Executive Director of the Emergency Food Pantry, Stacie Loegering. She'll be joining us today to share more on what is all affecting food insecurity and how she is working towards food security. For over 50 years, the Emergency Food Pantry has helped feed people in Cass and Clay counties in times of crisis, unemployment, medical problems, or any other difficult situations. The pantry is providing hungry families and individuals with wholesome food during times of emergency. So whether you're looking to learn more about the impact of food insecurity or just hoping for an informative message, I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So let's get into it. All right, everyone, we are sitting here with Stacie today, and Stacie, we are so excited to be just talking about so much with you. You know, food insecurity is a huge topic, so I'm excited to dive deep. So thank you for being here today.
Yeah, I love to have the opportunity to talk about this with you.
Yes, yeah, you know, the Emergency Food Pantry is so special in our community, and food pantries are in every single community around the nation. So a very important work that you guys are doing. So let's dive right into it. And just for the first question, why do you do what you do, Stacie? What are you most passionate about in your role as the executive director?
I feel very lucky that I've been able to have a job throughout my career that is helping people. And it's really about basic needs. You know, people cannot do the things they want to do, reach their goals, lead healthy lives, if those basic needs aren't met. And it is just a great opportunity to be able to be there for the thousands of people that are in need.
Yes, and you really are fulfilling a lot of basic needs for people in our community. And, you know, we'll touch more on that. But let's kick it off by just explaining to someone listening, what is food insecurity?
Yeah, when you think about food insecurity, there are a lot of layers to it. And if we look at a true definition, it's really about the economy and the social impacts that allows a person that they don't have enough food. It's uncertain food. But I think to be able to unpack that a little bit, I think a large part of the things that we really do miss is it's being able to get things that are healthy, be able to get them in socially acceptable ways, which I'll take a minute to talk about in a few minutes. But it's really about meeting those dietary guidelines to live a healthy life. And one of the things that we end up doing is we use the word hunger kind of in same as the food insecurity. And hunger is really different. We can all understand the feeling of hunger, right? Mm-hmm. It's been a little longer since you've had your meal, or you've used a lot more calories during that day, and your body's telling you you need hunger. And one of the things we know is it resonates a little bit more when we do talk about the word hunger, even though they're not the same things. It really is thoughtful to recognize when we're saying hunger, it is about food insecurity.
Yeah.
And one of the things the Emergency Food Pantry has really tried to work on is framing it in a way that we're working towards food security, right? Again, you might be hearing us say reduce hunger, but really it's the security. And what that means is everybody in the household at all times has enough food so they have the active, healthy life. You know, we recognize for kiddos, if they don't get adequate nutrition in their young years, that's development and long-term health conditions that we could potentially have not had to deal with if that stuff would have been in their life when they were younger.
Totally. And I love how you brought up the fact of it's not just food, it's healthy food.
It is.
And it's about how you get it in a socially acceptable way.
Yeah.
Because that's dignity.
It is dignity. And I think, sometimes it's, a person who might go into a dumpster. It's maybe somebody who sits on a street corner and asks for food. There are other things that people are doing for survival in order to have a place to live and things to eat. Somebody might resort to stealing, in order to do that. And I've heard horror stories of, a person who wasn't having enough money at their house and there was bread that was going into the garbage at their job. And today they thought, can I just bring a couple of these loaves home? And the manager needed to let them go because they were stealing that food, and we don't think that happens here, but, we know looking around us, it's hidden. But definitely people are struggling near us.
Yeah. So you guys are the Emergency Food Pantry. There's also banks, food banks. So what is the difference between that?
Yeah, I love this question. Our organization's been around for 50 years and I love history. And so in the middle of that history, it talks about in the 1980s, there was this campaign to let people know the difference. And here we are in 2025, still trying to help people know the difference.
Yeah, I don't even know.
No, so we are a system, right? At the national level, Feeding America organizes a number of different food banks, and food banks can be thought of as the places that will go out and get food, store food, and then distribute food. And one of kind of a fun way that I've talked about this with friends is food banks have the boxes of food that are stored and eventually distributed. We're food pantries. Other terms, food pantries, food shelves, even homeless shelters. There's a lot of different places that are within this Feeding America network. That's where people really get the food. So thinking about the food pantry is really directly thinking at almost like a grocery store, if you will, in our situation. Other times it might be boxes of food that go out, but it's really the person receiving the food. So thinking about the box for the bank and the people for the pantry. Another way, if you really know grocery stores, you've got the grocery store warehouse, which would be the food bank. And then that's where you go and get your food at the grocery store level. And that's what a food pantry would be.
Okay. Yes. No, that's good to know. So there's distribution versus more so of a grocery store experience.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think the other point about that is Great Plains Food Bank is the only food bank in North Dakota. And they also serve Clay County, Minnesota. And there's almost 200 food partners within that network.
Wow.
And so they're trying to distribute out to all of the different places as well as Clay County. And then we also talk about helping Cass County and Clay County, but we also say surrounding area. And that really opens that up for people who are hungry and food insecure to be able to get resources through our system.
Okay. Wow. Well, good to know. Thank you for, distinguishing that for us. So I see so many things out there of, even for us in North Dakota, that every county has food insecurity. And it might be an invisible need. It's a basic need, but it might be invisible. You don't know if someone's hungry. So with all these statistics, is there an increase in the pantry usage, would you say?
Yeah, I would say probably, the 2020 COVID pandemic, I think has changed things up and down. But as we looked at that trend line, I say it is going up. And one of the things that we know, if we're looking at that kind of economic way of looking at North Dakota, over 77,000 people living in North Dakota really fall into that food insecurity situation. And the latest I was looking at the Feeding America network is 1 in 10. That's not something we think about when we think about our state. No. It's not something when we think about even our metro region. So last year at the food pantry, nearly 23,000 unique individuals got food just specifically from us at the Emergency Food Pantry.
Wow.
And of course, that's larger. There's other people that got food as far as some of the other food pantries that are here in the Fargo-Moorhead area.
Yeah. Wow. So you guys truly are just in the Fargo-Moorhead area serving over 23,000 people?
Yep, just about 23,000. And it is one of those things that, especially when I'm talking with youth, I'm like, if you're looking at your classroom, if you're at a church group, sometimes even when I'm driving, I sometimes pause and think, you know what, looking around, we know that 1 in 7 kids locally don't have enough access to adequate food. And so I think that's just another way for us to recognize, like, who are those people in our lives? It's hidden.
It's totally hidden.
There are people who are like, I can figure this out. We can just push through till payday. We can eat some less than healthy foods. And sometimes people aren't even telling their friends and family that they're in need of help.
Wow. So sad. So what are some factors that are impacting people that needs food assistance? So for the general public that might not see this need, what are those factors that are impacting this need that's growing and growing that someone might need food assistance?
So I'll talk some generalities, and then I'll kind of get into some of the stories that we hear sometimes at the food pantry when people are coming through. So much of it is just stable economy. And what that means is a living wage where a person is able to have one job and able to do the other things that they want to do in their life beyond that. A number of the people that we meet are working multiple jobs, and they're maybe having a job that maybe does not have health in
like benefits.
Yeah, I'm going to pause there. I think it's what I'm trying to say there is it's like they don't get the sick leave. And so when it's even specifically when families are coming through, it might be a day when their child was sick. It might be a very difficult medical situation that they're working through. They might be the family member that helps multiple siblings or parents. And so the thing that they might be needing to do is take time off of work and not able to be there consistently. And again, we hear people are, losing jobs over that. We've seen people working 2 and 3 jobs within the household in order to make ends meet because the hourly wage is quite low, and they aren't able to get consistent hours to be able to pay for basic needs.
Totally. So there's so many factors that are impacting this that we might not see, like you said, the economy and having stable stuff with our economy, but also I'm sure housing and homelessness. And there's so many factors that go into it. So I'm curious if food insecurity is sometimes a tipping point for some other things like homelessness and some other factors that we see, or if it's the other way around. Can you speak to that?
That's interesting. I almost would say both, and I'll tell you some thoughts and some things that I was kind of looking up as well. I actually, when I took my job nearly 10 years ago, thought that we would be serving more people who were unhoused. But what I really find is people who are using the food pantries have very stable situations. Things have been going well. They maybe lost a job or got a pay reduction. And so those more difficult situations that might change. But one of the things that we do see that some people will do is in order to keep their housing, so they're not going to get evicted, they might start paying that rent and then not having enough food. And another thing that I think can flip what can happen is if somebody does lose their housing, that's one of the first things they absolutely need. And so there are many people too that are lack of consistent transportation. So now if a person is unhoused, they may or may not have that consistent transportation. It's very difficult to be able to kind of navigate where to get some of those reduced foods using systems like ours in order to be able to kind of balance, again, what do people need? Sense of security, a place to live, and food. Beyond that, people can really start working on health and some of the other things, building relationships and some of their long-term goals in their life. The other thing I'll mention too is chronic health disease, because we see, and we've done studies here in the North Dakota, that 70% of the people receiving food through the food pantry system are at least one chronic health. And I've seen, as I've been kind of watching numbers, that is higher than the general public. The general public has gone to about 60%. So it's, getting kind of a closer gap, just I think some of the health needs for everyone. But we do recognize that just so many things that are going on for people who are using the food pantries. A couple of the big ones that stand out are things like diabetes. We've got like some of those chronic health pains, things like that. And everybody has their own unique situation, but we do see some of those trends. Every 4 to 5 years, Great Plains Food Bank will do a study that works with the people receiving food as well as partners like us in the network to really start to understand what that looks like. And so we do hear that quite a bit, that a medical diagnosis or something that's been chronic chronically happening within one or more family members is a huge struggle for people.
Yes. And, I always hear people say that food is medicine. And speaking to that chronic health epidemic with specifically the people you're serving, that's why the quality of your food, I'm sure, is so important, and you guys value that so much.
We do. And so I think one of the trends that's really happened within both, locally and nationally is to really think about it's not just about calories. It's about having food that is going to, create health. So back in the 70s, the system like ours was set up in order to take food that was excess. It was things that might be going into the garbage. It might be not selling at a grocery store. And what we're looking at is a system to say, how are we balancing that? Because we still do a lot of what we call food recovery. We're able to access the foods that wouldn't get sold, but also recognize how can we get a little bit healthier, more fresh opportunities. So one family that really stands out for me was a child who had some health issues, was not able to eat some certain foods. And so mom was actually creating 2 different meals because some of the foods that her one son could not eat were more expensive. And so to try to create meals with that more expensive food for the family of 5, it just was something they couldn't manage. And they got to a point where they came in and she was worried because she wasn't sure if we were going to have the type of things that could really help their family. We do have consistently gluten-free options when somebody's letting us know some foods that they can or cannot eat, or maybe even just what they can and cannot cook. We were able to try to match that. And so in this situation, it was really awesome because the staff and volunteer that were helping get that food ready, prepackaged foods that, the boxed goods and things like that so they could make meals, really worked hard to get foods where they were able to make like one meal for everybody in the family. And that just brought tears to mom's eyes because she's like, this is just the caring that came along with helping grocery shopping. But also it's just that reduced stress to be able to recognize, wow, the next couple of days are going to be a little easier than they have been. We know we have the food and we know our family can sit down and enjoy the same meal together.
Yes, I love the firsthand care that comes with just the pantry experience. So I'd love for you to speak more onto just the experiences that you're seeing on the day-to-day. So for a family that's walking into the pantry, the emotions around that experience, the circumstances they might be coming with, but also just walk us through the process of what it's like. Because again, for the general public that maybe is blessed enough to not have to experience that, what are the emotions, the circumstances for a family that's walking through the process?
I love that question. And I think one of the, phrases I like to think about is if you or anybody are ever in need, this is good stuff to understand. Right now, we do have some daytime hours during the morning and afternoon. We're looking at extending that as well into the evenings because we know that people are working full time. And so currently, if somebody's working full time and needs us, just giving us a phone call and trying to arrange some other opportunities. Maybe somebody else can pick up for them, etc. We're also in a really exciting time right now of doing some piloting of some different ways of getting food to people, as well as those different schedules like I just mentioned. Mm-hmm. So if somebody finds themselves in that situation, we can go to their website and find when we're open. A person will come in through line. They do not have to have any specific documentation. It's really helpful to have an ID, just so we get the spelling of the names right. We'll ask for some basic information about the family and recognizing that we do have a poverty guideline of 200%. And what that just means is if we were going out to the website, there's an income guideline. But one of the other things that's brilliant about our donors, about the system in itself, if somebody is struggling, they might have an adequate income, but that one thing happens, please still come in, right? Just to recognize that, come on in and we'll get those questions asked. Now, currently, we're still kind of in a response to the kind of COVID pandemic where we're doing a bit more of the pre-packed options. And what that looks like is we'll ask if there's foods a person can't eat. We'll have them start shopping for things like the fresh fruits and vegetables and maybe some of the excess things that we have in the freezer. Typically, the full cart isn't done by the time they've done that part of the shopping. So then they head back outside to the parking lot. It gives us a little more space in the building. And then we have usually a volunteer or a staff member filling the rest of the cart. I think I'll finish the process and then we can talk a little bit about what that food would look like inside that cart. Yeah. So then typically a staff member or volunteer would push that cart back out to the parking lot and a person can be on their way. So, it can be pretty seamless. There are times of the week that just tend to be a little busier. but really want people to feel, welcome to come in during those times and get that. So I think I'll pause just a second and then talk about what types of foods are in there. And I think one of the things Emergency Food Pantry is very proud of is trying to have that variety. Now, to make sure we have consistent food, I'm going to say about a third of what we offer is non-perishable foods. So we're looking at some of the canned goods, right? It might be tomatoes, beans, vegetables, and fruit, rice, noodles, cereal, things like that, tuna, peanut butter, soups, so that we know that we consistently have items. And that's been something that we've been really proud of, because there are times where you might hear different things on the news where it's like, oh, there wasn't a lot of variety. There was really limited food. Then we're also very consistent with having frozen meat. So any meat that comes into our building, we do freeze, again, helping us give that. And when somebody's in need, we have that accessible. Through much of the history, we've also really tried to have milk or juice and eggs. Now, because of when eggs are available, that's been one of those things that have been up and down. But it's interesting to see behind the scenes, working with the warehouses from the grocery stores as well. Some of that food comes and goes. And then I'd say the last section of food that we have are those other cold things that you find in the refrigerator. We're getting those from the local grocery warehouses as well as the grocery stores. So almost always we have some sort of dairy, whether that's cottage cheese or yogurt. We would see a lot of the lettuce and things like that, some of those cut vegetables. And this is another time of year where as people are getting their gardens ready, when you have excess, also think about the Emergency Food Pantry, because we can accept fresh fruits and vegetables. And especially between now and fall harvest, it's really amazing to be able to offer that fresh food. So that kind of in a nutshell is just really trying to have a wide variety. We're striving to have about a week's worth of food for people. And again, depends on a person's appetite, depends on a person's type of food that they like to eat together. We don't sit and meal plan, but try to provide some of those basics that will be available to the person.
Did you know that medical expenses are the #1 cause of bankruptcy? If you want to help an individual or family experiencing a health crisis, loss of life, or other trauma, head to lendahandup.org to support a neighbor in need today. If you want to learn more about the silent epidemic of digital addiction, learn to spot the warning signs of child sexual abuse, or are interested in starting a charitable fund for a cause you're passionate about, head to dacmed.org today. Okay, yes, it's so good to understand the process and the types of food and the process for the people that are coming through. So can you speak to then the emotions behind the families or the individuals coming through? Because I'm sure you have so many stories that remind you and just make you stop and remember why you do what you do.
Absolutely. And one of them I was thinking about before we started to talk this morning, actually is from about a decade ago, really soon after I took this job. So I think of it as Jonathan's family, but Jonathan was the 5-year-old, okay? So mom comes in and her eyes are down and she was quite embarrassed to be there. She had 5-year-old Jonathan, baby in a car seat, dad was working, and another child was in school. So family of 5, and they were doing everything right. They had 1 car. They worked 2 full-time jobs opposite shift. So they didn't have some of those extra things like childcare that they were going to pay for. And they were doing okay. One of the things that they would find as family time was for breakfast. So they'd be able to get together. One parent was sleeping, one parent would get up, one parent would come home, that sort of thing, and they'd have time together. So mom came in to get that. And that time we were physically shopping all of the food. She had a chance to work with one of the volunteers and get a chance to go through every of those items and choose what her family could eat. And Jonathan was there too. And he thought this was the coolest thing, that he had like a shopping helper, right? And one of his favorite things was having peanut butter toast for breakfast. One thing that maybe people don't know so much about with food pantries is we often try to have also basic needs. So usually we have like diapers, we try to have some of the hygiene items. And on this particular day, we did have toothbrushes and toothpaste. So as they're getting the cart ready, you could see Mom's shoulders starting to relax. You could see her kind of just get a little bit brighter smile. And I think when she saw the cartload of food that she was leaving with is when her tears started. And she was so grateful. I mean, just the way she was able to look at the volunteer and thank her and thank everybody that had helped her just made such a difference. And so seeing Mom's stress, you could just see that like weight get lifted. There was also Jonathan, who had peanut butter in one hand and toothbrush in another, and he went skipping out of there too.
I love it.
So it's trying to normalize the idea that, we're just a different sort of grocery store. And I think sometimes when we're telling youth that as well, what do you mean it's free? Because that whole concept of what do you have as far as cash, check, credit card, how are you paying for groceries? But wow, you can come to this place without those.
Wow, such a powerful story to just think of this mom coming in embarrassed, but seeing that weight just physically lifted off her and coming to tears from it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing that had changed for them is everything was going smoothly and their car battery died. And so we're only looking at a small amount of money. They did not have set aside for that. And they needed to decide, do we buy groceries or do we get this car battery? Well, again, with one car, they needed to fix the car, and then knew about our services to be able to get both.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's so hard for individuals and families sometimes where they come in and they might be first met with that shame and guilt and those emotions that you just feel uneasy about, accepting help.
Yeah. And I was able to hear somebody recently who had used a different sort of service, but how she was greeted was she was told, this is exactly why we're here. And, I try to tell people that as well. We've got plenty of food. Even if you hear things in the news, we have two messages. We still need money. We still need food. We still need volunteers to keep running smoothly. On the other hand, if you're in need of food, come in, because it's our job to figure that out, right? And so there's that sense of relief to, wow, I can feed my child. Wow, I don't have to skip a meal or two in order for my family to eat.
Yes. And, a while back you were talking about different partners that you work with to be able to provide these services. And before we dive into all of that, because I'm curious of just, again, how it all works and how you have to come together with different community partners, I've had this burning thought in my mind of just, man, I feel like there's such a stigma around food insecurity for just across the nation for the general public. And would you agree, or how can you speak to that?
Yeah, there definitely is. And I think that, sometimes we talk about regional pride. We're supposed to take care of ourselves. We're supposed to be able to figure it out. But people are working so hard to figure it out, And it's, it's really that opportunity to recognize that everybody deserves food. Everybody deserves healthy food and those options to be able to add to that. We recognize that when somebody's coming in, they might not have 100% bare cupboards, but it might not be something that they can put together maybe to have a meal or specifically a day or two. And so I think that stigma just comes along with some of the stereotypes. People can say, well, my goodness, if they can't afford to buy their own food, they must have another habit that they can get rid of. Or, they shouldn't have a cell phone. In order to, you should be able to feed your family. And those things, living in this day and age, you need decent, adequate transportation. You need access to a cell phone in order to, apply for jobs and keep your job, stay in touch with family and friends. And so I think sometimes people start getting maybe a narrow view of what a person should have to deal with in order to just meet those basic needs.
Yes. And I love that you brought it back to basic needs. And thank you for sharing more of just your thoughts around the stigma of food insecurity, because again, with the basic needs, I feel like you might have a couple basic needs met, but you might be working so hard to meet those ones that there's others that you're falling short on.
I think the other thing I think about when we're more than food, some of it is literally, things like toilet paper and soap and shampoo if we have it, those types of things. But I think the other point is reducing stress, is reducing worry. And even though I think I've heard terms like this before, something hit me during a presentation about 2 weeks ago. When somebody has that high stress, their body, even if they're putting calories in and calories out, their body is not able to get the nutrition from that food. So if we have parents, if we have individuals, if we have kids, senior citizens who's living chronic stress, we really need to work on helping people reduce that as well. Because you can't, as I talk about, your body can get to that rest and digest situation. But again, that long-term high impact of stress is some of those health concerns that we're seeing, as well as just obviously that feeling of how can I simply relax, because I literally am trying to figure out where my next meals are coming from.
Yes. Wow. I love that you touched on how you guys are more than just, emergency food and a pantry. You're reducing the stress and improving health, and just there's so much more.
And I think when we think about who we are and where we're going, our name came from 1972, right? So since the 70s, on what the founders really thought we were and needed to be, I think we've changed as our society has changed as well. And as we look forward, I think a couple of the things we recognize is we want to be more for that connection to the community services. We want to be thinking about like the holistic. We wanted to be thinking about almost like that community food hub versus, we don't just provide a box of food right now, but we really want to open that up in a broader way to recognize what is somebody's health needs for their food, what are those other services that they might need to be needing in their family as well, and how can we help bridge that?
Yes, totally. Thank you. So I want to bring it back to just the food pantry itself and how you guys work. And I know that you guys work with a lot of community partners. Can you explain to us what that looks like and the importance of why partners need to come together?
Oh my gosh, we could not do this work alone. And I think that's that beauty of that whole like food security and food insecurity system that we have put in the community for a number of decades. And so one of the things that we really recognize is we have an opportunity to give people about a week's worth of food, but we have people come in approximately once every other month. Now that means that there's many days and many weeks in between when they're coming back to us. And there's about 12 other food pantries in town. And so they're able to go to those other places kind of in between. And each of us have, as those pantries kind of have those regulations more for making sure we have enough inventory so that when the next person comes in, we're able to kind of keep that rotating. We also know that we're, as a system, part of the solution, right? One of the big pieces we've been looking at is not just how to get food to people, but what are the root causes of hunger? What are we doing about that? What are the barriers that people are not able to get the food, and how can we make that more accessible? And so each organization has really been working at what they see themselves as far as to be able to bring that. And we were also in the community able to help reestablish the Hunger Coalition. So locally, it's called the Cass Clay Hunger Coalition. The person is staffed through Great Plains Food Bank. And in Cass and Clay County, we work on Common Goal. So each time we go through a strategic planning process, we recognize what is one of the biggest things that we can work on. So there's been quite a few successes over the years. We're holding an annual summit. And if you think about it, it is not just the people who are providing food to people. It's many organizations. We've got education, we've got health, we've got the local hospitals. There's many, many people around the table to say, how can we collectively work through the needs in our community? A couple of the highlights that we did in the past was recognizing about education, things that we're talking about today. Just how can we have more people know about food insecurity and hunger? And also we were instrumental in setting up the repack program, piloting with schools to be able to take foods that may have gone to waste from their lunch, freeze it, and then provide that to families who are getting that through their food pantry at the school. And so as we look towards that coalition, one of the things we really want to break down are some of the issues with transportation, recognizing that even though there are a number of places people can get food, whether it's a food shelf, a food pantry, it might be actually going to and having a meal, it's really difficult if you don't have consistent transportation on your own to get to those different places. And so that's kind of the systemic. One of the things that we really work on is just that collaboration with local grocery stores, recognizing other places like churches. We have over 40 churches that will donate food, come in and volunteer. We've got dozens of businesses. And I think it's recognizing like what people can do to help with that mission. When we do find within the network, there might be one pantry that has a little excess of something. We also have a collaboration where we're communicating to each other. So there might be somebody who's open 2 days a week. And if they have too much food at the end of that second day, how can that food be distributed to a place that's going to be open in another day? So I think there's a lot of like grassroots stuff that are still kind of being developed to recognize we're working really hard as a system to be able to have the right food in the right places for the right people throughout the community.
Wow, I love picturing, just as you're explaining all that, the way I'm picturing this system working together, this grassroots, what you're exactly saying. And it just makes me appreciate everything that you guys do, because there's so many community partners that have to come together to be able to distribute the food, to make sure if someone's in need and one pantry's not open, that they go to the next pantry. There's just so much to it. And it's so case by case for individuals as well.
It is, and I think there are some people who say, oh, we live really near you. This is the best place for us to get food. There's somebody else who, because of their work hours, really find another one because of hours that they're open, as maybe their main place to get food. And so, but as a system, it's so amazing. And I feel really blessed to be in the Fargo-Moorhead area, to be able to have the groups that are working together to really recognize we're all in it to make sure people have enough food and can work towards, the other things that are really important in their life.
Yes. So is food desert something that you guys systematically look at as well? Is that something that's, prevalent to the Fargo-Moorhead area?
We have looked at that. In general, yes, there are places that we can map that out, because I think there are locations where the biggest place to get food are going to be convenience stores, which are often maybe that less healthy as far as more salt, less fresh fruits and vegetables there, and it's more expensive. And so one of the things we look at is, how we talked about every county in North Dakota?
Yeah.
I would say very pockets of people around the Fargo-Moorhead, West Fargo, Dilworth area, they're spread throughout the neighborhoods, And so we recognize that even if you might look at it as not a food desert, there are likely people who are struggling to make those basic, rent payments, mortgage payments, basic needs. I think about the families I've heard who have to make the decision to say, do we get prescriptions for ourselves? Do we choose food? Maybe I don't pay my electrical bill this month, so I can do this, but then next month I'll pay my electrical bill. So it's juggling money in order to just get some of those basics paid for.
Yes. So how about the kids? I know when we're recording this, we're rolling into summer. And for some of the kids that maybe don't have as much access in the summer to food now that school's out, do you see an increase of kids? How do you support the kids, or what does that look like?
Specifically at our location, we have historically seen families more often in the summer, and it just recognizing that sometimes you're paying for daycare that you didn't have during the school year. Sometimes you're just trying to think of more enrichments, so like the family can afford some basic things, but we really want to send them to that sports camp during the day or things like that. And I think the other part is, even though it's supposed to be a time of, fun and frolicking around, you also now need summer clothes because the kids have grown. You're also thinking about now in the fall, we're going to also need some new school clothes because they've outgrown that. And so I think there are just a lot of pieces that become really complicated as far as a time of year that people don't always think of it in that way. With so many different changes, kind of with some of the spendings, I feel like one of the things that is going to be consistent this summer are some locations where kids can go to get some lunches. So that'll be something we want to keep our eyes on, to know that there are sometimes summer meal programs that are often going through other organizations. Sometimes it's a park, that sort of thing. And as far as I know, it's summer 2025, we'll still be able to offer that as well.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as we wrap up this conversation, I'd love if you could just put a bow on top, where if you had to give an elevator pitch to someone and explain why the Emergency Food Pantry, what is the need in our community and why?
Yeah. So I think one of the things is that hunger is hidden. We talked about the food insecurity, that recognizing that when we look around us, 1 in 7 kids do not have adequate access to food. And so recognizing that that's life-changing. It's life-changing to know that we can get nutrition into families, we can have them grow with their own relationships, we can recognize some of the strengths throughout a lifespan, and thinking about not just the food, but just the dignity, and recognizing that all of us deserve healthy food. All of us deserve access to some choice of foods. And I think that we have a 50-year history of being able to use support from community partners, being able to get the donations, volunteers. We are able to provide over 1,000 families every month a week's worth of food. And we could not do that without the community, So it's recognizing that even though we have a strong history and a strong team, we are always looking for new people to help. So if I can put a plug,
yes, I was just going to ask.
Our website is emergencyfoodpantry.com, and it really lists those 3 different ways of getting involved. One of the things I'm really excited about is we have churches who will adopt us for a week. They'll do food drives for us as well, and we're starting to see that grow with our businesses. And so if a person is recognizing wow, I lead a team, we'd love to do a volunteer group together, or would love to choose a day or choose a week to be able to kind of adopt and kind of help fund that and help make sure that food is going out the door. Love to check out our website. Our one number is 237-9337, where a person can call and just say, I'd love to figure out more of how we could partner to help make sure our neighbors are getting fed.
All right. Well, thank you for adding in that plug, because I was just going to ask.
I love it.
Well, seriously, thank you so much, Stacie, for just being open to having this conversation, because like you said, food insecurity can be hidden, and just having this conversation brings so much light into how we can all be more focused on supporting food insecurity and making people more food secure. And I just love that, you put in your plug of how we can support the Emergency Food Pantry and all the community partners that are working together in this system to make people healthier, stronger, less hungry. I love it. I love your mission. I love what you guys do. So thank you for being here today.
Well, we so appreciate the opportunity to do that. It's just recognizing the people are hurting, and there's so many helping, loving hearts around that we can make it better, and we can do that together.
Yes. Thank you, Stacie. We can all understand the feeling of hunger. It's a basic need, and everyone deserves food. Yet there are so many people around us that are working so hard just to make ends meet, working multiple jobs just to pay for these basic needs like housing, transportation, and food. I love how Stacie today shared with us that the Emergency Food Pantry is focused on working towards food security, so people can get nutritious food and get it in a socially acceptable way, because that creates a happy and healthy life. It's not just about calories, but it's about creating health. It was so fun to learn from Stacie today, because there's just so many factors that impact and create food insecurity for families and individuals all around us. I sure appreciate the Emergency Food Pantry and all that they do to provide that healthy food, meaningful connections, and community resources that build food security. Don't forget that you can check out more at theemergencyfoodpantry.com. All right, folks, that's a wrap for today. So thank you so much for listening. We really hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll catch you next time on the DMF podcast. And remember, we are called to serve.